Hi there, it's Leah. I thought I would put a quick video together on how to brew kombucha. It is such an easy, straightforward thing to do, and it really introduces healthy bacteria that are a little bit different than probiotics, but really healthy bacteria for your gut and your system in a really simple way and in batches large enough that your whole family can enjoy them. So here we go. So let's start by talking about what ingredients that you need when making your kombucha. So what you see here is my kombucha that I've been brewing for a couple weeks. You can see my existing SCOBY that I've had for years. And then each time you brew, you get a new SCOBY at the top of your jar, and that's what you see here. And then of course the really great kombucha tea with all the healthy bacteria in it. You also need to have filtered water. You'll need a lot of it. So if you're using a filter pitcher, you may want to filter the water in advance. Everything gets stronger when you brew kombucha, and that goes for the bad things as well. So if you're brewing with water that has fluoride in it, then it's going to strengthen the fluoride and any other toxins. So be sure to use filtered water. I try to use organic because, again, everything gets stronger, including the pesticides. So I like to use these Newman's Own black tea bags because they're meant for iced tea and making iced tea pitchers. It's actually a really large tea bag. I don't know if you can tell the difference when it's in my hand, but this is actually a larger, probably as much tea as 2 regular sized tea bags. I like this because I can save time by using just a couple tea bags instead of having to wrap my loose tea in a cloth like I do sometimes. But it does definitely save time to use the bigger tea bags and not having to use as many tea bags as the smaller bags. So I usually use 2 to 3 of these, usually more often 2 of them. It's really important to have a metal spoon when pouring hot water into a jar, which is what you will be doing. It helps, it's a conductor, so it helps draw the heat from the hot water and keep your jar from breaking. But after you've put your kombucha into the jar, you want to be sure to only use wood because metal reacts in an unfavorable way with the acids in the SCOBY and the kombucha. And then lastly, organic sugar, because you are brewing a sweet tea before you reintroduce your SCOBY. And again, it's really important that you're putting the good things into the tea instead of things that might have GMOs and pesticides. So this organic sugar comes from the cane juice, which I think you can see there. But keep in mind, if you're using sugar that comes from sugar beets are actually a very large GMO crop. So if you're not getting organic sugar, you may end up with sugar that's really a high GMO product. I am now preparing to take the SCOBY and the original larger SCOBY called the Mother out of the jar, and I'm going to put it into this bowl. It's going to hang out here in this bowl while I brew a new batch of the sweet tea, and then when I'm done brewing the tea, I will return the SCOBYs back to the jar here. I have rubbed apple cider vinegar on my hands. Even though I have washed my hands, I want to eliminate any possibility of contaminating the SCOBY. It's super important to keep your SCOBY clean, and it helps prevent mold and other things that can happen. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this fabric off of the jar that has the SCOBY in it. I'm going to place my SCOBY in the jar, and I'm going to place this fabric on top of the SCOBY to protect it while I'm brewing the tea. I do have 2 SCOBYs here. One of them is my original, and the other one is the thinner SCOBY that grew over the last couple weeks on top. I'm going to put them in this jar with 1 cup of the sweet tea for each SCOBY, and that enables me to return some of the tea with the SCOBY into the jar after I'm done brewing the sweet tea. You can see the SCOBY is now in the bowl, and I'm going to take the same fabric I was using to cover my jar, and I'm going to cover up this bowl while I'm brewing the new tea because I want to make sure that there's no dust particles or bugs or anything else that can slip down into the bowl. I have poured 4 cups into this really large measuring cup of filtered water. It was just room temperature water, but that doesn't really matter because we are going to pour this into this tea kettle here and bring the water until just before boiling, and you'll be able to hear it. Do you hear that? That means it's just about done. We don't want it coming to a full boil. So I'm going to pull this off the burner, and I'm gonna pour it into my pot. I don't always clean my jar in the dishwasher. I usually don't even rinse it out in between batches. So what you see here is a little bit of the old residue from the prior batch with the metal spoon, because I'm going to be pouring this very hot water into my jar and I don't want it to break. It doesn't seem to matter how many years I've done this, I still get really nervous pouring the boiling water into my jar. But my grandma taught me, when dealing with jellies and jams and pouring very hot things into mason jars, the metal spoon trick, and it works like a charm for me. I'm going to take that out now because I don't want it to be incorporated or come in contact with the kombucha in any way. Okay, and I've taken the paper tags off the edges of my tea bags because I'm just going to drop the whole thing into the pot or into the jar. And then using my wooden spoon, I'm going to make sure that they are fully submerged. And I'm going to steep this for 5 to 10 minutes. So when you are a busy parent and you're used to going 500 miles per hour, there's definitely that waiting, the 5 to 10 minutes for your tea, which is excruciating. But then after it's brewed for that 5 to 10 minutes, you go ahead and add your sugar. And you want to stir this until it's completely dissolved. I also want to remind you all, I know that we're all using alternative sweeteners in baking and cooking these days, and I don't mean necessarily the artificial sweeteners, but you know, some of us are using stevia or maple syrup or honey. I've only ever used the organic sugar for my successful batches. I have tried using honey and maple syrup, and the taste has really not been great. So you can see I'm still stirring here, and you can see there's still quite a bit of sugar granules, so you want that completely dissolved. Just remember, if you are concerned about the sugar content, the sugar is actually there for the yeast of your kombucha to live off of, and so your tea won't be as sweet after it's brewed. So I'm now adding another 8 cups of room temperature water. So for those of you who are watching outside of the US, 4 cups is just shy of 1 liter. It's about 1 quart. So hopefully that helps you with measurements there. Now, after I've added the 8 cups of filtered room temperature water to my warm sweet tea brew, I'm going to take my finger, which again, I've cleaned with the apple cider vinegar, and I am going to put it into the tea. Now, you want your tea to be room temperature. So by sticking my finger in there, if it doesn't feel like I've done anything, that I can't actually feel the water, then it means it's the right temperature because it's exactly body temperature. So by sticking my finger in, I can't actually feel the tea, so I know it's the right temperature. So now I am taking my larger of my 2 scobies, my mother, and I've already added the liquid portion of the tea that I saved to my jar, and I'm going to gently slip my SCOBY back into the jar. Now, some of them may stay at the top of the jar like this. You can see mine's already slanting to the side, which actually is how my SCOBYs most often look. Sometimes it might sink to the bottom, and that's totally okay. What is also okay is when you start to see a new SCOBY forming at the top. That means that your kombucha is doing what it's supposed to do. I think I failed to mention before, the jar I use for brewing my kombucha is a gallon size jar. It's actually an Anchor Hocking jar, and I've had it for years. It's been really sturdy for doing its job. So then after I've brewed my tea, I've put my SCOBY back in there. I replaced the fabric that I had on there before. I just use a cloth napkin, but you can also just cut some fabric that you may have. I've replaced the rubber band to keep the bugs and pests and dust and whatnot out of the jar. And I'm going to find a warm place in my kitchen for this out of direct sunlight. I'm going to set my intention that it's going to brew really well and thank it for doing its work. And then I'm going to keep checking in on it every week or 2. So you've made your kombucha, you've set it aside in a warm place in your kitchen or some other safe place in your home where it doesn't get direct sunlight. And it's going to brew for a few weeks. The warmer that you keep your home, the faster it brews. Alternatively, the cooler that you keep your home, the much longer it's going to take to brew. I know in the wintertime, I end up placing my jar right on top of one of those seedling warming mats that you can use when you're starting seedlings, and that helps keep my kombucha brewing at regular intervals. I know that they do make heating mats specifically for kombucha, but I just use the seedling mat. You can also kind of wrap the mat around your jar instead of placing your jar right on top of it. But that keeps the kombucha coming regularly instead of having to wait a really long time in between batches. After your kombucha has been brewing for a couple weeks, you'll be able to smell that it is getting a little bit of a vinegary smell, and that's when you know it's time to change out your kombucha and to flavor it. I like to flavor mine with frozen cherries and almond extract. This is actually my favorite flavor when I'm making kombucha, and I don't really measure super well. I just kind of pour a little extract, throw in a handful of cherries, and then I pour my kombucha over the top of that. It's also really important, just like when we were preparing the kombucha, not to use metal. So a lot of these mason jars come with metal rings. You want to be sure to either use plastic or to wrap a little bit of plastic wrap over the jar before you screw your lid on. Alternatively, you can use the swing top bottles, which are really popular for brewing kombucha when you're flavoring it, because it helps contain the air and the bubbles and get that fizzy feeling that people really enjoy with the kombucha. So I'm pouring my kombucha into my jar with the cherries and the almond extract. And I'm going to put the lid on this, and I'm going to leave it aside someplace warm but without direct sunlight and allow it to brew for a couple days. What you're going to find is you'll start to notice a tiny little thin layer of SCOBY on the top of your jar. You might see some of the yeast bacteria hanging off of the fruit. The fruit may sink, as you're seeing it's happening already. But usually about 1 or 2 days, depending on how much of the fruit flavor you want in it, should suffice for flavoring your kombucha. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you accessed this video through my website, then you have already received the free printable with step-by-step instructions on how to brew your kombucha. If you are catching this on YouTube, go to at The Abundant Parent, either on Facebook or Instagram. Sign up for the email for the video, and with that you will get the printable for the step-by-step instructions. Please share, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.